Hey there, my name is Dr. Danielle Nadorff. You may hear me referred to in the department as the other Dr. Nadorff because my husband Michael is the director of clinical training, so he's like the more famous one or whatever. But the correct term, just so you know, is that I am the nicer and more fun Dr. Nadorff. So a little bit about me. I obtained my PhD in developmental psychology, actually, in 2011 from West Virginia University, and that is where I met my husband as well. And we came to MSU in the fall of 2012. I was an instructor for the first 3 years and then switched over to tenure track in fall of 2015. I just submitted my tenure track application this past summer. It's so far been approved at the first 3 out of 7 levels. I should hear back on that, hopefully in the affirmative, by this upcoming summer. It takes like about a year to get all the way through, which is a long process, but it's going well. On a more personal note, we have a 6-year-old daughter and a house full of animals. One of them you can see in the back here. We have 2 dogs and 3 cats and 4 brine shrimp, believe it or not. So as far as the lab, it's, as you probably have seen on the website, hopefully by now. So it's the Grand Families Lab, and we study intergenerational relationships. So for the most part, that usually has to do with custodial grandparents. So those are grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. And we focus on both the grandparent outcomes and the grandkid outcomes. So that means that my lab has students that are both interested in gerontology primarily, like my current 2nd-year student, Rachel Scott, and those that are more interested in the child outcomes, like my current 1st year, Acacia Lopez, and hopefully you all will get to speak more with both of them. So overall, within the lab, we have 5 primary goals. Our first one is to investigate outcomes for these families, for both the caregivers and the children. Although they are a very prevalent group, with, depending on exactly how you define and classify them, as far as like some people classify them as like kids living in the same home with grandparents, period, and some say that, okay, the grandparents have to have the primary responsibility for caring for them with no middle generation present most of the time. So depending on how strict you are in your classification, there's anywhere from between about like 3.5 million to 7 million of these grandkids being raised by their grandparents in the US. So they're very prevalent, but a very understudied group. So just studying more about them and knowing more about their outcomes, period, is our first goal. Number 2, we seek to provide more fair comparison groups. A lot of the research that has been done with just comparing them to their peers. So for the grandparent side, just like other people who are parents, which that isn't really fair, because if they are parents but not custodial grandparents, then they're going to be a different age most of the time, and they're going to have different circumstances and life events and knowledge and all that. Or if you're talking about the kids' side, there's usually some sort of trauma that's occurred, no matter what, to have the kids be raised not by their parents anymore. So if you're just comparing them to Billy and Susie down the street in a 2-person family, a 2-parent family, then that's not really going to have the same shared life events. So we seek to provide more fair comparison groups like foster families, or we've done a lot of longitudinal research comparing them to, like for the caregivers, for example, their lives before they took on that custody of the grandchild versus afterwards. So what more fair comparison group can there be than comparing somebody with themselves? We also seek to whenever possible, work from a strengths-based approach. So identifying not just like, oh, hey, these are all the things that are wrong and negative and bad about these families, but also within these fair comparison groups and things like that, trying to highlight what it is that they are doing well and areas where they're doing even better than foster families, for example. Also seek to translate these findings into interventions and to carry those out through the Graham Family Support Group that I direct. It's funded from the Brookdale Foundation through their Relatives as Parents program, and that meets, it used to meet in person here in town, but now we've switched to an online format, which was brought on by COVID-19, but it's really been handy because we've been able to expand to other areas beyond just in town here. And then we also seek to advocate for these families at a local, state, and even federal level. Like I've met with 2 Mississippi state senators about these challenges within these families as well. So those are some of the goals of our lab. I try to, as a mentor, have really concrete goals that are operationalized. We have lab meetings where we use Asana task monitoring to each week set out definable goals that are operationalized to where everyone understands how they're going to meet them and what they're going to do that week and work on them. And then I try to use a lot of positive reinforcement, and I'll go ahead and admit that as far as my mentoring style, I tend to look for students that I describe as golden retrievers, and hopefully that won't offend people. But what I mean by that is I use a mentoring style where I get along well with students that are highly motivated by praise, but also motivated by like faint criticism, where if things are going poorly, I don't have to do much more than just show like, oh, I'm kind of disappointed in that. And then they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, let me fix that. So we tend to have students like that, and they are a good match in that they do really well. I love to be able to, motivate and praise and have those clearly defined goals that people can meet, and then get to use a lot of praise and warmth and things like that. And I don't like to have to criticize and bear the brunt of the bad news, but of course I will when necessary. But so if you are a golden retriever type of person that enjoys working either with older adults or with kids, especially within family relationships, then I hope you will check out the lab. Nice to meet you.